You know, the age-old anime matchup has always been Light versus Lelouch. How about we throw Ayano Koji in there as well? Classroom of the Elite. A show that I didn't have much expectation going into, but just based off title and some things I kind of knew, I was like, okay. I expected something similar to Assassination Classroom, but this was much better than that. First of all, what is the plot to Classroom of the Elite? Well, pretty much the Japanese government has made this school the Tokyo Metropolitan Advanced Nurturing School, which pretty much is dedicated solely to fostering the next generation of politicians, leaders, pretty much gathering what will be some of the country's smartest people and trying to foster that. And our story follows the character of Kiyotaka Ayano Koji. At first, he just seems like a quiet, reserved, kept to himself kind of kid, and he ends up in Class D, which in the hierarchy of this school is the class of the rejects. And at the beginning, Ayano Koji is a character who you can kind of see is just like, you know, I don't want to be involved in anything crazy. I just want to be under the radar. So let me live my life here. But things begin to escalate as he meets the character Suzune Horikita, a girl who puts on the facade as keeping it all together like she's high and mighty, but deep down, she has hidden desires and wants, specifically when it comes to her older brother. And over the course of the 3 seasons that have come out of this show so far, Ayano Koji begins to turn from kind of a quiet, reserved kid to showing what he's really about. How deep down, he's probably the smartest person on the planet at the age of like probably what, 15, because they're first years. And what is seemingly the main plot on the surface is the whole hierarchy of the classes can change depending on how high their point system is. So it goes from Class A to Class D. And the goal specifically of Suzune is that she wants to get to Class A because they get the greatest benefits. But of course, this being similar to Assassination Classroom, it's not just a case of just her wanting to get to Class A. It then turns into let's get the entirety of our class to Class A, which seems like the initial plot at first. I mean, it is the main plot, but what the show is really about and where the real, do I want to say heart? I would more say mind of the show is Ayano Koji's scheming, plot, the interweaving character connections. And the biggest praise I have for this show is that the drama, the mystery, the interweaving just storylines. And I'll just get right into it. I was kind of nervous going into it initially. I was just like, I hope this isn't boring. Bro, once the plot kicks in, I'll tell you the exact moment it kicked in for me. It was when Ayano Koji met Suzune's brother, and her brother decided to throw a few punches at Ayano Koji, and he easily just like ultra instincts his way around the punches. That's when I was like, okay, so this dude isn't all just talk. And that's really one of the biggest things I have to praise for this show is that it's not boring. Despite it being primarily a drama, there's so much richness to it. It does kind of suck though, because I've seen like the average reviews for this, and it's like it goes anywhere from like a 6 to a 7. I don't know, man. I get we're in the era of the TikTok attention span brain rot phase. If there's not an explosion or boobs on the screen for every 5 seconds, then why do I care? But this was just such a show where I did not want it to end, and it sucks that I've caught up. I mean, I'm glad that there's gonna be more. Now, from the production side of things, this is done amazingly by Studio Lerche, who I believe I've talked about before. Oh yeah, because they've also done Assassination Classroom. The only gripe I really have with it is the art style sometimes, is that sometimes their faces just look very bland. That is another thing I have to praise. With this being a show that has so many characters in it and a lot of plot points you have to keep track of, it does a really good job at making the characters, their designs distinct enough to be memorable. Despite them not exactly being characters whose designs I haven't already seen in a million other things, it still makes them distinct enough, especially like their character traits, their stories, and how it ultimately ties into Ayano Koji. I'll get more into spoilers in a second because there's some specific things I want to talk about. And honestly, the most interesting thing about these first 3 seasons with Ayano Koji as our main character, he's a character who we learn more about like his backstory, but I like how much of it is left up to mystery in like the first season and a half. He was a kid who was like raised his entire life to be an elite. He was raised in the White Room, and he ultimately escaped all that, and that's how he ended up at this school. This is him running away. Fascinating is the one word that comes to mind when I talk about this show. Is it took that lingering want I've always wanted to see in stories like Death Note and even Code Geass, and it's carried over now to stuff like this, where it's taking that idea from like power fantasy shows with a super OP protagonist, but making it feel more grounded. He's OP in the sense that his brain is too massive for this world. I mean, but even still, it doesn't mean that he has it super easy, because by the end of like season 3, it's like, how does this dude have time to do anything? The funniest part was in like the last couple episodes of season 3, where it's like every scene was Aya and Koji talking to somebody. Because like he would end one conversation, get a phone call, it's like, hey, can you meet me up? Then get a message, hey, can we meet up? It's my one gripe with it is that it seems set up that it's like, oh, Suzune and Aya no Koji, they're kind of going to be like the dynamic duo. And while they're like that for a little bit, I mean, by the end of season 1, which I guess I'll start talking about spoilers now, it's more shown that Aya no Koji, he does not care really about relationships. I mean, he's just so dead inside. He only cares about winning, I suppose. It happens in so many scenes when you think like, oh, he's growing closer with this person, and then it goes to his internal monologue. It's just like, well, I finally got this person to start relying on me. Another pawn has been added to my board. It sucks, but it's kind of like chilling. Throughout season 1, mainly, it's like you see him helping Suzune a lot, and then by the very end, it's just his internal monologue. It's just like, Suzune Horikita is someone I can use even more in the future. And then like he does that for so many other characters going forward, and just it makes you wonder, whatever the end of this story is, because that's also the other side of things, is that he never smiles. One of the scenes I think a lot about is that little arc with the one girl who was trying to get to know him better and wanted to ask him out. She asked him just like, why don't you ever smile? Because I was expecting him to say like, oh, because I don't know how to, but he said like, because I've never found something that has earned a smile from me. It's not that he doesn't know how to smile, it's just he doesn't need to. He chooses not to. Really looking at the whole story, anytime Aya no Koji even loses, it's how he twists it to where it's like, no, I meant for that to happen. Nothing is ever done by mistake. Going back to Suzune, again, like it's set up early on, you think like, oh, they're gonna be like a dynamic duo, but it's like Suzune gets left in the dust by like season 2. I mean, she still plays her roles, obviously, but she feels much less like secondary main character and just becomes more supporting character. She kind of gets replaced by Kei once season 2 starts. I mean, replaced in the sense that Kei sort of fills more of like the secondary main character role, I feel like. And especially, which I guess I'll talk about, the ending of season 3, I hope that confession is I mean, he plays it off to himself like it's not genuine, the confession from both him and Kei. You can tell he wants it though. It's how he phrases it, where the one thing I haven't experimented with, romance, and just all tying back to the whole thing of something earning a smile from him. Will this girl I'm holding in my arms be able to show me how to smile? I gotta rewatch that scene again, because God, honestly, I want to rewatch like the whole show again. It is one of those ones where it's kind of hard to rewatch, just because, I mean, it's like any mystery show. It's like once you know how it ends up, it's kind of hard to rewatch it than knowing. But him and Kei's relationship, it's an interesting one, because it seems like you'd never expect it coming off of season 1, because Kei is like played off as such a gyaru, for lack of better terms. But then like her story about how she's been a subject of bullying for so long, and how he takes advantage of that and makes her his pawn. But then over time she starts falling for him, and it's like Stockholm syndrome. Season 3 especially, it's like, is this like a soft harem? Just because the amount of girls who take such an interest in him. I don't know, I'm pulling for Kei. I mean, this is one of those ones where I would try to put my romance brain aside, just focus on the drama, the intrigue. But I mean, the romance is there, and it does play somewhat of a role. And especially going into season 4, I'm curious to see how much of a role it will play. Because where season 3 leaves off is that Aya no Koji finds out, it's like, oh, we're gonna send another kid from the White Room to join your class next year. And if you can figure out who they are, then we'll leave you alone. Which is interesting, introducing that plot point while also doing the romance plot point, because Aya no Koji's thing is that you can't outsmart him because he doesn't have any outward weaknesses, really. There isn't anything you can exploit from him. So I think it's interesting that they're introducing the romance angle at the same time as this other kid is coming in. I feel like they're going to introduce this idea of, oh, okay, yeah, this whole romance thing, it's interesting and good for them, but like now you're introducing a potential weakness for him. I mean, it's not as though he can't just solve things with his fist. I mean, speaking of fucking awesome scenes, the end of season 2 when he just straight up beats the absolute living shit out of Ryuen. That scene was both so satisfying and also amazingly well animated. I'd say animation wise, I mean, clearly that absolutely was the best scene in the whole show. I mean, really looking at like the whole show, it's like, in his way, Aya no Koji's already, I guess, conquered like each of the classes. He's made Ryuen submit to him, even though he's still doing his own thing. He's not in his way as much. Ichinose is now sort of falling for him as well. He's got class C and he's got class B, and then class A, like in his own way, he's beaten Alice, but they're sort of like mutuals. I don't think it's it's a case where Alice loves him, but like, you know, she's fascinated with him. So I guess it makes sense to introduce now this new outside factor into the story because like in terms of everything internal at the school, pretty much got it on lock. The only place for him to now fight and conquer is like the school board themselves. It's crazy to think where a story like this can go. I'm curious, is the manga done? It's still going. Fuck me. Well, that's annoying, but hey, more to look forward to. I mean, another thing, I mean, going back to the intro of this is that people always talk about, you know, Light versus Lelouch who would win. I feel like Ayano Koji is a good one to throw in there. I mean, obviously with like Light and Lelouch, it's different because they have like supernatural aspects to them. Whereas with Ayano Koji, it's just real world. There's no supernatural aspect to him, aside from him being insanely otherworldly types of smart. But with Light and Lelouch, I have the argument that those two have weaknesses. With Light, despite him wanting to be god of the new world, he always wanted to try his best to protect his family. I mean, same with Lelouch as well. Like, he never wanted to get his sister involved. And he still had those he cared about, like Suzaku and even Yuffie, which... Whereas with Ayano Koji, at least through the first 3 seasons, he doesn't have that. He only views people as pawns. One of the best comments I saw, which I'll pull it up here, Ayano Koji's favorite pawn has finally been promoted as his queen, which is a fascinating idea because I feel like for Ayano Koji, he's only had pawns, not really any other chess pieces. It's like he's the king, the rest are just pawns. Maybe Suzune was like a knight or a rook, but he didn't have a queen, really. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the whole show is pretty much just a chess analogy. Yeah, again, I definitely have a lot more I could talk about. Why am I wearing headphones for this review? I just realized. But in terms of a score, what would I give Classroom of the Elite? I gave season 1 the lowest score, just because season 1, I guess, is the slowest, but granted, that's the setup season. Overall, though, I would say Classroom of the Elite, 10 out of 10. I am kind of reluctant with that 10 out of 10, just because, I don't know, it's fresh, and in terms of rewatching it, it would be harder to rewatch, just because, I mean, now I know things. Does he know? But even still, it was a fascinating, amazing journey to go through those first 3 seasons. I know that the 3rd season it recently came out and finished. Probably gonna be a while, maybe another year or 2 before season 4 starts. So until then, I might dabble into the manga, even though I know now that it's not finished, but more story is more story, and I am open to experiencing more of this phenomenal story. A story that I absolutely recommend that you watch. But either way, this was my review for the first 3 seasons of the anime of Classroom of the Elite. Join me for many other videos of the sort, be they future anime reviews, reactions, gameplay, and everything else that'll be coming out soon. So until next time, I'm Lancer, thanks for watching.